What is it with Spinosaurs and just causing people headaches? I say with my Spinosaurus avatar front and center on the screen. Yeah, he's gonna be real happy with me. Gonna be waiting outside my door to have some words with me for sure. But I'll worry about that later. Today we are talking about a dinosaur that I've heard a lot about over the years, but never really researched before doing this video. The Irritator, a dinosaur rescued from the black market trade. Honestly, it almost sounds like an Indiana Jones plot when you say it that way. I can't be the only one who would go see Indiana Jones and the Irritating Dinosaur, right? Irritator challengeri, named for the character Professor Challenger from Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World and its sequels, lived in the Albian Age of the Cretaceous some 100 million years ago. Only one specimen of the genus has been found by paleontologists, and it was, as I said, wrestled from the black market trade, though there is debate if a second species of Irritator or just a synonym of Irritator challengeri, or if another specimen represents a new genus altogether, have been found. It's as much of a cluster as it sounds. The original skull of Irritator itself was actually sold by the dealers on the black market, and in doing so, they heavily altered the original skull to ramp up the price of the sale. This was where the name Irritator came from, because of just how much this irritated the first paleontologist that actually studied it once the fossils made their way to them after they were contacted about it after the sale. Imagine your name for the rest of time being a reminder for how irritating you were because some evolved apes decided to mess with your bones some 100 million years after you died. I'd be mad. But we're just going to get right to it in this one. No proper intro like I usually do. Let's just wing it and get right to it. So it was actually the peer reviewers following the initial study who were the ones that suggested the skull belonged to a theropod instead of a pterosaur. The skull was flattened and crushed, the right side being preserved, but the left heavily damaged. The tip of the jaw was also missing, and the back part of the skull was also heavily eroded. It was just not in good shape at all, suffering a mix of damage from erosion over the millions of years and from when it was actually collected. All this damage is actually why it was altered with plaster to make it look more intact by the fossil traders, and the original buyers were unaware of this. They just thought that they had bought a, fancy dinosaur skull. They had no idea that what they actually had was the skull of a new dinosaur unknown to humankind. After it was finally discovered and sent to paleontologists for study, Irritator was found to share some many dental similarities to Spinosaurus. No, Spino, you don't need to show us in person. Irritator had a thin enamel, no serrations on the teeth, and straight conical tooth crowns. As more research has been ongoing on both dinosaurs, the two are still viewed as completely separate, save for both being in the same subfamily, though they do have some similarities that might make them kind of like long-lost cousins, and in a way they sorta are, sorta not. This might prompt me to actually make a video on Spinosaurus now. I know that would make Spino happy. For once. For once, maybe I would get to go a whole day without him threatening to eat me. Now, as I kind of teased before, there is another dinosaur closely tied to Irritator. If Spino would please move, you could see both holotypes on screen. Thank you, Spino. So, the dinosaur on the bottom is the one that we're still trying to figure out. It lived at the same time as Irritator, but paleontologists cannot agree if it is a synonym, a second species of Irritator, or another genus altogether. All have been suggested. So, on the bottom, and I'm probably going to butcher this pretty bad, is Ongatorama lamai. Above is the Irritator holotype after the plaster was removed. The debate continues with studies done as recent as 2017. A team of Brazilian paleontologists studying the dinosaurs noted difference in various aspects of their fossilized remains. However, with only having part of a skull of Irritator, we don't exactly have many of it to go on. And however, the study did still conclude that the two were not from the same individual, but added that they spotted an apparent point where the bones might overlap with one another, hinting that they are the same dinosaur. If you look, you can see where the bones are thought to have overlapped. It's that last tooth right before that longer, almost vampire-looking thing. For both, they almost seem to overlap right there. Did this mean both could have come from the same species? Possibly. The possible overlap, however, you see in the image was called into question. In 2023 even, Another paleontologist team did not confirm that the overlap actually existed. And even back in 2005, it had also been concluded in another study that the fossils were from separate genera of dinosaur. However, the debate to this day is still ongoing, and we don't know. From what I read, currently it seems like AL being a synonym of IC is the more popular theory. I could do a whole video on this debate. Honestly, there's a lot to it, and the debate has not been settled. Just like what on Earth Spinosaurus actually looked like. You know how there's like a new study every year that just rewrites the book? Yeah, it's the same thing with this. Like I said, Spinosaurs just tend to give us a headache for whatever reason. Maybe they're all as petty as Spino is. Also, it's worth mentioning, in 2011, a fire occurred at a museum in Rio de Janeiro where the fossils of multiple other Spinosaur finds from South America were housed, including possible other Irritator fossils that had yet to be described, and they were all destroyed. A sad and frustrating loss to science, and a just horrible blow to Irritator story as a whole, and one of many issues making answering these mysteries all the harder. This is just a quick summary of all of this, the debate, the history, the fossils being discovered and being studied. It's just, you could write a book on all this, and I would honestly be down to do a video dedicated to this specific topic in the future. But for now, let's move on to the description, anatomy, and paleobiology of Irritator. Irritator lived in South America. And if you know anything about Spinosaurs, you probably know that Spinosaurus lived in Africa. So how did this happen? How do we have fossils of the same group of dinosaurs on continents separated by oceans? Well, South America had actually begun to break apart from Africa in the early Cretaceous, and the Spinosaurs, who appeared before it fully split, were divided between the two when they did. They appeared before the split happened, with Spinosaurus and others like it being found in Africa, but then you also had Spinosaurs being found in South America. And among the Spinos, Irritator was actually one of the quote-unquote smaller ones, only as far as we can tell from our limited fossils, growing to somewhere around 25 to 26 feet in length from what we can guess. Again, our limited access of fossils to study. Likely weighing somewhere around 1.1 short tons, and possibly being up to as much as 4, and a height estimated to be around 6.6 feet tall, Irritator's heavily damaged holotype skull can still tell us a lot about the animal and its biology. Sometimes a few fossils from an animal is all it takes to tell you a few vital things about how they lived, which is good considering a lot of the fossils we have of animals are sometimes limited to just a fragment of a leg bone, for example, or a jaw bone. You know, some human species even that we know existed, we know from only like a couple teeth. The brain case was inclined backwards on Irritator, and the entire skull is thought to have been 24 inches long. Irritator's nostrils were smaller than some other Spinos, like Baryonyx, but larger than the big hitter Spinosaurus's were. On the holotype skull, the frontmost snout bones remained intact, letting us get an idea of how the nostrils would have looked and functioned. The head of the modern gharial has some similarities to the Irritator, specifically from the Indian gharial. Now, this is just a case of convergent evolution, but in 1996, it was theorized Irritator used its elongated snout to fish, and that fish made up most of its diet. Studies afterward have supported this idea, the teeth arrangement being like the gharial, which does engage in this type of diet. This trait and other similarities to crocodilians has been noted as being present in other Spinos as well. Now, a 2023 study concluded that Irritator could open its jaws with a wide gape, so wide that it would resemble how a pelican can open its mouth today. They really are little dinosaurs. And like the modern dinosaurs we're comparing them to, these dinosaurs were also all about that aquatic lifestyle. Nowadays, a very popular image for Spinos of almost any kind is this type of semi-aquatic lifestyle, sometimes compared to a crocodile. As I've mentioned, there have been lots of similarities noted between the two, indicating that they lived, at least some Spinos did anyway, similar lifestyles as crocodiles. And I've even described Spino, my avatar who has been dancing around the screen all video, swimming like a crocodile in my novel a few times because I just personally love the image of Spino swimming this way. Irritator is among the Spinos thought to have lived this semi-aquatic lifestyle, and from what I read, it's thought that it might have even lived it more than some others, which I thought was very interesting. Irritators are not just thought to have been semi-aquatic, but the dinosaur is thought to have occupied a very specific semi-aquatic niche that allowed them to exist without really competing with too many other animals for prey, which is good since, as we'll cover, they had a lot of neighbors in their area, some of which would have eaten the same fish they did. Irritator and Spinosaurus both also had their eyes positioned further up on their skulls than you'll see on a theropod like a T-Rex, for example, which would actually allow them to see above the water when their body was submerged. Again, giving you a crocodile or alligator image with its head just above the water. It's very easy to imagine. And with this and its large gaping mouth, Irritator could have swallowed large prey likely whole. Its bite was also weak, so again, perhaps its method of hunting was just gulp, and that's it. With the ability to swim, high-positioned eyes, binocular vision, and a large open mouth, it all paints the image of a niche but very formidable predator when in the water. I definitely wouldn't want to swim with one. Would you swim with an Irritator for $1,000,000? Let me know in a comment. Now, as once again I teased you with, let's talk about the actual world Irritator lived in and what Earth was like at the time and what animals it might have interacted with or simply lived alongside of. This is going to be a very different kind of safari than the ones you're used to. Irritator's Earth was certainly a somewhat familiar, but still alien place compared to the planet today. It lived in the Albian Age, some 100 million years ago roughly. During this time, Brazil and West Africa were, yes, still connected, but it wouldn't be too much longer before they split apart completely, resulting in the look they have today where they look like they'd snapped together, because they snapped apart. The Southern Atlantic Ocean, which separates them, was only just forming at this time, and it was much smaller. The area Irritator was found indicates that it lived in a coastal area with lagoons and sea level cycles, and a very, very heavy pterosaur population. Conifers were a common plant in the area as well, and as I said, pterosaurs were common. They were, in fact, essentially the rulers. They were everywhere. It was when I looked at a list of how many there were in that area, I like did a double take. There was a bunch of them. They were just thickly packed together in all different kinds of species. From ones that looked like the typical image of a pterosaur you think of when you first hear the word, to the more unique looking ones, such as the tapejara. Fish were also abundant and plentiful in the region. Again, just all different kinds of fish. So many different species and just so many different groups. There were also piscivores, and also, with all this biodiversity in mind, a very interesting lack of herbivorous dinosaurs, possibly hinting that the local vegetation was in small quantities, or perhaps it was not the kind of vegetation they liked to eat. You know that herbivores nowadays can sometimes be picky, and I'm sure dinosaurs were no exceptions. Of course, the carnivorous dinosaurs in the region had the exact opposite for their food. Food was abundant, and likely after storm events, it was even more so because there would have been carrion washing ashore of fish and pterosaurs and all kinds of stuff. And also, just with all of this fish and all these other animals being so plentiful, it was likely that there wasn't extremely stiff competition on a good day. I'm sure there was some. And there was also predators in the sea as well. There were sharks, and there were also other familiar animals like urchins. And overall, this region Irritator lived in was just abundant with animal life, and it would have been fascinating and a vibrant environment to actually have seen in person. It honestly sounds like a prehistoric tropical Irritator paradise with a mix of animals we will never see and ones that are familiar to what we have today. And I honestly wish I could see it with my own eyes. I'm sure our imaginations cannot do any of how this actually looked justice at all. Now, the environment of the Albian Age of the Cretaceous itself, the Albian Age lasted from roughly 113 million years ago to 100-ish million years ago, give or take a few million years in either direction, and this was the last age of the early Cretaceous. In North America at this time, there was a dry savanna. Sea levels were much higher during most of the Cretaceous than they were today, and during the Albian Age, The global temperature is thought to have been somewhere around 17 Celsius on average. Various distinctive ammonites actually help us define the biozones of the Alban Age. Dinosaurs were also still plentiful at this time, very diverse, spread out more than ever, and they would be until they started to decline, and even then they would remain so until the end of the Cretaceous itself, some 34 million years after the end of the Alban Age. Irritator, though, would be long gone by that day. There's a lot more I could talk about Irritator, about the Alban Age, about the environment it lived in, about the history of its study, and I think that this was a good intro and a good place to call it a day. As I've said a few times here, I could easily make another video on this dinosaur, and honestly, I could probably do a couple. And perhaps I will. I could talk about the environment it lived in much more detail. I could talk about the history of its fossils being found, the black market shenanigans, the debate on it and its possible synonym. There's a lot. There's a lot, but I think that this was a good intro. And if you guys are interested in more videos on Irritator, let me know, like the video so I know that you are, and I will definitely put it on my list to revisit in the coming months. I found this very interesting to learn about, and honestly, I might revisit this topic on my own anyway, just for my own enjoyment. And I hope you enjoyed this, and I hope you found this dinosaur as interesting as I do. For me, this one just always flew under the radar, but I'm really happy I decided to give it the attention it deserves because it was way more fascinating than I actually ever thought it would be. And if you enjoy paleo videos, please tell me topics you want to see covered. I just talked about Titanophonius, and the next dinosaur I'll be talking about, probably in July, will be the Lithranax, a favorite of mine. But please, tell me ones you want to see covered. I want to look into what you guys are interested in as well. And check out some of my other videos on paleo topics. I've talked about some rather obscure ones that you've probably never heard of, so you might find some stuff you didn't know about. And I've also talked about possible dinosaur fossils past the KPG boundary, which is very fascinating and just interesting that's just how I'm gonna describe it. Check out that video. It's the end of the Cretaceous video I did. And if you like dinosaurs and prehistoric animals, check out my audio narrations from my upcoming novel, The Spinosaurus, which features Spino in all his glory, and it features a very large cast of prehistoric animals from throughout history. The plot follows human society trying to cope after an anomaly slowly resurrects every single animal that once existed on this planet. Any animal that is now extinct is suddenly alive again. And the book deals with the fallout of all of that. I will put those in the description, so please check them out, and I would absolutely love to know what you think. And until then, though, you all have a good one, and thank you for watching.